Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we'll be talking about how much income and savings you need to buy a 4-room HDB flat in Singapore. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. In this channel, we'll demystify real estate topics and make them digestible to the layman. I'm Daryl and I've helped multiple others through their property purchase. I'll be posting new videos every week, so if you want a layman breakdown to help you to make your first purchase, consider subscribing. Let's get started. With the HDB resale market making all-time high like this and this, there's a lot of talk about how affordable a HDB flat has become. I mean, sure, the number of million-dollar HDB flats are growing, but there are many other more affordable options out there. And certainly many options for those making 4K a month. We won't be talking about million-dollar HDB flats today, but if that's something you're interested in, or if you want to know how much you need to be making in order to afford one, let me know in the comment section below. In this video, we'll be covering the following 5 items. We will break down what we mean by afford. We will be covering some examples, so we will lay out some assumptions that we will be using for these calculations. The first example we will cover is a slightly older HDB flat for 470k. The second example we'll cover is a slightly newer and more expensive unit for 628k. After covering both examples and running through the numbers, we'll wrap up with some closing thoughts. So let's talk a bit about affordability. Affordability can mean different things to different people. In this video, we will evaluate affordability from 2 main standpoints. The first is the upfront requirement component and how much cash or CPF you will need to be able to meet the down payment requirements. We will take it a step further and talk about how much you will need if you want to factor in renovation, furnishing, and even a rainy day fund. The second component of affordability is the monthly component. We will also look into what your monthly salary needs to be in order to afford the examples that we will be talking about. Besides simply being able to pay off the monthly installment, your monthly income also needs to be high enough to get approval for your loan, considering MAS regulations such as the TDSR and MSR. This is the part where we will answer whether the amount of 4K a month is sufficient. The focus of this discussion is purely on affordability, so we will not be talking about whether the units are fairly priced and whether you should make the purchase. Let's move on to the assumptions. The first assumption that we will make is that it's going to be a 2-party household, and this is as opposed to making the flat purchase as a single. We will assume that each party's gross income is 4K. That means a total combined monthly income of 8K. We will assume that the purchase is a 4-room resale HDB flat. We will be factoring in grants. For an 8K monthly household income, your enhanced housing grant will be 10K. For a 4-room unit, your family grant will be 80K. We will assume no proximity grant. That brings the total amount of grants to be 90K in total. A HDB loan with a loan tenure of 25 years will be used for the calculation. This is as opposed to a bank loan. If you're wondering what the difference between a HDB loan and a bank loan is, I'll be linking a video in the description below. The next assumption that we will be making is that both you and your spouse are first-time applicants. In terms of monthly expenses, which includes the likes of your groceries and your other miscellaneous bills, we will assume that will be a total of 2K a month for both parties combined. This does not include the monthly installment of the home loan. This number is of course very discretionary and depends on your own personal lifestyle, but we will just use 2K for this assumption. We are also assuming that both you and your spouse are both under 55 years old. Either of you are above 55 years old, this would affect the CPF numbers by a little bit. With a combined gross salary of 8K a month, your take home will be 6.4K. Before buying your flats and after paying off your miscellaneous expenses, your monthly cost savings will be 4.4K a month. This number is important because it will help us to determine how long you need to save before you have sufficient funds to cover the upfront component. Now with the assumptions aside, let's dive into our first example. Example 1 is a slightly older unit. It's a 4-room 958 square feet unit in Woodlands, 11 minutes from Woodlands MRT. Its lease started in 1998 and the asking price is 470k. Again, this discussion is not on the unit itself, so we will not deep dive into it. We'll just use its price tag to talk about affordability. We will assume that the unit's price is its asking price for simplicity's sake, although in reality this is not usually the case. So we have a purchase price of 470k and total grants of 90k. If you're wondering how we derive 90k worth of grants, you can refer to the assumptions section earlier on. As mentioned earlier, we will break down the affordability into 2 components: the upfront requirements and the monthly requirements. To take it a step further, we will further break down the upfront requirements into 2 sections: the cash and CPF section, which can either use cash or CPF to fulfill, and the cash section, which you can only use cash to fulfill. So all in all, you have 3 sections of requirements to fulfill, denoted by the 3 columns here. If you can fulfill all these 3 columns, then we can count it as you can afford the unit. Your down payment of 20% will be 96k. Your buyer's stamp duty after calculation will be 8.7k. Your legal fees will be $295. The $90K worth of grants you receive can be used to offset some of this. After the offset from your grants, your minimum requirement here is $13K. So with $13K, that looks good so far, right? Okay, let's continue. Now, there are some items which can only be paid for in cash. For example, your renovation and your furnishing. Of course, this depends on how extensive you want to do it. It is really variable, but I think it's important to factor this in. Since this is a slightly older unit, let's use $90K for computation's sake. If you have a buyer agent to support your purchase, you will need to pay the fee for that as well. However, since this is not a hard must, I'm omitting it from the calculation. I will just leave the number here for you to remember to factor in based on your own circumstances. Many first-time home buyers are newlyweds too. With that, there will be the cost of holding a wedding. This wedding cost is not directly related to a home purchase. Likewise, this number is very variable and it is entirely dependent on personal preference. For that reason, I am omitting the number from the calculation. But since it's a very common cost that most couples need to tie in together with their home purchase, I'm leaving this item here for you to remember to factor in when you run your own calculation. If you are taking the maximum loan of 80% of the purchase price, your monthly installment will be 1.7K. You may think, okay what, as long as the household makes more than 1.7K, we are good to go. Not entirely true. MAS, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, has put in place some regulations to ensure that you do not over-borrow in relation to your own monthly income. These two regulations are the MSR and TDSR. The MSR, which stands for Mortgage Servicing Ratio, stipulates that your monthly installment for a HDB or EC that is under MOP, which in this case it is, cannot exceed 30% of your monthly income. The TDSR, which stands for Total Debt Servicing Ratio, on the other hand, stipulates that all your debt obligations cannot exceed 55% of your monthly income. Factoring all of this in, that means in order for you to take a loan with a monthly installment of 1.7K, your combined monthly salary needs to be 5.7K minimally. So what we have worked out here is great. Now we have the minimum requirements in order for us to buy a 470K unit. However, emptying all of your funds into a unit is never a good idea. In the event that an emergency strikes, or you lose your income, or something unforeseen happens, you may run into a cash flow issue. You do not want to be in such a situation because in that situation you would have trouble paying up your obligations. These obligations will be things like your monthly installment as well as your day-to-day bills like your groceries. With that, I generally advise anywhere between 3 to 6 months set aside for a rainy day fund. Now let's apply that principle to this example and see how our numbers change with it. A 6-month buffer on your monthly installment will be 21K. As this can be paid in either cash or CPF, we can account for it under the cash and CPF section. That now brings our prudent requirement up to 34K. Besides just a mortgage of your home, if you are staying in a household with your partner, you likely have other bills to pay. Bills like your groceries, your utilities, your insurance. In the section earlier, we made the assumption that this number will be 2K a month per household. Of course, it depends on your own personal circumstances. This is just an example that we will use for our calculation. 6 months worth of expenses would be 12K in total. As you cannot use your CPF to pay for these bills, we will account for it under the cash section. If we add this to our 90K, we have a prudent cash requirement of 102K. Now that we have painted a full picture, you can see a few things. Most importantly, with a combined household income of 8K, you have met the requirements to secure a loan for this purchase. In terms of upfront requirements, 34K is approximately 18 months of your combined OA contributions, and 102K is approximately 23 months of your combined cash savings, slightly less than 2 years. So what do you think? Is this something that's affordable for somebody making 4K a month? Let me know in the comment section below. Now let's look at the second example. In this example, we are looking at another 4-room flat. This time it is in the Punggol area. With the lease starting in 2014, it is slightly newer. The floor space is 990 square feet. The asking price for this unit is 628K. Again, for simplicity's sake, let's use the asking price as the purchase price. That will be 628K. As the circumstances in both examples are similar, the total grants will be 90K. A 20% down payment will be 126K. Your buyer's stamp duty will be 13.4K. Your legal fees will be $389. Again, the grants will save you 90K. That brings your minimum cash/CPF requirements to 50K. Since this is a slightly newer unit, let's set renovation and furnishing to be 50K. Again, this really depends on your circumstances. Similar to the previous example, Buyer agent fee and wedding costs are just kept here as a reminder. We are not including that in our calculation. If you take the maximum loan tenure of 25 years for a HDB loan, your monthly installment comes up to be 2.3k. After factoring in MAS requirements such as the TDSR and the MSR, your combined monthly household income needs to be minimally 7.6k. Now, let's add in our prudency buffers to our upfront component. For your cash/CPF component, the prudent requirement will now be 63.8k. For your cash component, the prudent requirement will now be 62k. Now with the picture fully painted, let's go back to our example and ask ourselves if a couple making 4k each can afford a unit like this. Well, firstly, they definitely meet the minimum salary requirements. In terms of upfront components, they will require 35 months and 14 months of savings respectively. I think this is something that's possible with some disciplined savings over a few years. Of course, another question that you may be asking is whether you should put so much of your savings into a single HDB unit. What do you think? Do you think this is something that's attainable? And also, should somebody earning 4k a month put so much of his net worth into a single HDB unit? I guess there's no right or wrong answer. It really depends on how comfortable you are committing to such a purchase. So we walked through two examples, one at a price point of 470k and one at a price point of 620k. In both instances, it would have been possible for a couple earning 4k each to be able to afford the unit. But the earning power of 4k a month and the two units are just purely examples. Most importantly, we walked through the process of how to break down and analyze a sticker price for affordability. Many times, new home buyers get a sticker shock when they see a number like 600k for a first time, because it is the first time they are seeing a number so large. But what is important is that we know how to break down a big number like that into individual subcomponents and be able to scrutinize each of these components individually. That then enables you to more confidently answer the question of whether you can afford a unit like that or not. Naturally, as you're thinking about budgets and affordability, the next natural thing to think about is how to choose a unit, or what are the things that you need to look out for when trying to keep to a budget. Unfortunately, that is too large of a discussion to slot into this video here. But let me know, are they something that interests you? Let me know in the comment section below, and maybe it's something that we can talk about in a future video. Well, I hope this was helpful. See you in the next video. Ciao!